Good afternoon, Senator Cassano and Representative Zawistowski and everybody else. It's good to be here again. Before I give my testimony, I want to say that I have seen the governor's proposed amendment to Senate Bill 874, which is an education bill, as you know, and the first 4 sections of it are in this bill. I appreciate his responsiveness. He heard a lot from a lot of people, and including me, although I never had a chance to testify on that bill because it was in the Education Committee, which I sit on. So while I appreciate his responsiveness, there are still things that I think need to be said about that section and the rest of this bill. So I'll deliver that, and also that amendment is not actually before this committee today. So with that, here we go. As a whole, House Bill 7192 deals with fostering cooperation among municipalities and school districts, and among all levels of government, actually, the state included, with the aim of creating efficiencies. And I applaud that goal of fostering intergovernmental and regional cooperation. And there's a number of initiatives in this bill that could well lead to good outcomes. For example, considering and making specific recommendations for joint purchasing, for opportunities for the use of e-government solutions, for the streamlining of reporting by various levels of government. We talk about those things all the time, and I think that has a lot of merit. I'd also like to call attention to a part of the bill, Section 21, which would allow 2 or more municipalities to override their charters or local ordinances for the purpose of jointly performing functions they could otherwise perform separately. The municipalities of the Western Connecticut COG have called for this kind of provision because it would facilitate the voluntary elective sharing of services among municipalities, and I support that. That's a good provision. So I did want to call attention to that. But overall, I'm concerned that the goal of this bill is based on a questionable premise. And that premise seems to be that local governments and school districts are not generally inclined to share services or regionalize functions and must be either forced or incentivized to do so. For example, sections 15 to 20, which require municipalities to consolidate their tax assessment functions at a regional level, and sections 22 to 24, which require 60 towns to consolidate their emergency dispatch operations, would impose penalties for non-compliance. So this suggests that there wouldn't be this sharing, that they wouldn't share the services if existing obstacles could be removed, because there are existing obstacles. This committee, as well as the Education Committee, has heard multiple testimonies that demonstrated the contrary. In the case of emergency dispatch operations, for example, many town executives have cited current binding arbitration rules that have kept them from moving forward on sharing operations. Reforming binding arbitration and taking measures like the one described in Section 21 of the bill would be a far more constructive, easier, and more efficient way of fostering cooperation and sharing than requiring action and imposing penalties for noncompliance. I have some specific remarks. I know the bell rang, but you won't see me again this session.
Go fast.
with your indulgence. Sections 7 to 10 on education, which are duplicated in the other bill as well. These sections would create the Commission on Shared School Services costs to develop a plan for, as at least is still in the unamended bill, redistricting or consolidation of school services in school districts. Lest there be any doubt that the scope of the costs included, at least as a first intent, recommendations for changing the configurations of school districts. The terms redistricting and schools consolidation are used repeatedly, and also noteworthy is the reference on page 22 of Governor Lamont's budget book, which was released in mid-February before any public comment on the bill had been received. The reference was to a school services and redistricting commission. I have several concerns about this education portion of the bill. One is that the focus of COS's work appears to be on cost savings and operational efficiencies with little or no consideration for the quality of education overall, which should be always our primary concern when it comes to education. Second, many school districts would like to share services, and many have. A lot of them are very curious and eager to share services regarding special education, for example. Often, however, they're prevented from doing so because of costs, collective bargaining agreements, or various mandates. There are also cases, and I do want to point one out, there are cases where statewide legislation has passed to encourage sharing of services, but progress hasn't been able to move forward because of the same factors. For example, Governor Lamont has correctly recently highlighted North Carolina's single statewide contract for school software. Well, in 2017, this legislature, passed a bill, House Bill 7276, which became Public Act 17220, that required the state to survey local and regional boards of education on their use of digital school management and reporting software, with a view toward eventually providing a statewide option at no cost to districts. We wanted to make that language go farther, to require the state to issue an RFP, and then to proceed to a contract. But the state's fiscal constraints wouldn't have allowed it. And so we had to get rid of the fiscal note to pass the bill. But that law is still there. The bill's silent. This is a third concern. The bill is silent on the ultimate fate or purpose of the cost plan. And I think the governor has said some things to clear that up, but the bill as it still is, would it require legislative approval to be implemented? Would it require something from the Board of Education, the state board? Would penalties for non-compliance be in there? Is the plan simply an exercise in identifying voluntary opportunities for action by school districts? And I'm wrapping up. One last concern. The uncertainty created by the silence on the purpose of the plan is exacerbated by the length of time, nearly 2 years, COS would have to deliver it. And knowing that the configuration of the school districts could change 2 or 3 years from now does not inspire confidence among prospective residents of Connecticut towns. So, in conclusion, I think the legislature has a role to play in identifying and eliminating barriers to voluntary consolidation and sharing of services. But with a few exceptions, that is not the thrust of this bill. And therefore, I'm having sort of a difficult time seeing what the reason for it actually is. Thank you very much for your thoughtful consideration and your indulgence.